Hi, it's Jo Bingham here, and in this short video I'm just going to cover some of the colours that I use most when I'm painting horses. So we'll go through firstly the paint colours, and then we're going to switch to covering some of the typical colours of horses and what colours I would use to paint those. So if we go through the colours first, so I've actually listed them. So the first one we've got is ivory black. Now, I know a lot of watercolorists don't like using black, but when it comes to painting animals, I think it's essential. If you want your black horses to really, look solid and real, I would advise you using black. It's a really good color. So the next one we're going to use is sepia. Now, sepia is a great color. It's a very dark brown. It's probably the darkest one I've come across. And again, so I only use black when I'm painting black animals. But if you're painting a brown horse and you want that really dark brown color, oh, hang on, missed one. Sepia's here. Can you see how dark that is? So that's really good for under the tummy, wherever those shadow colors are. Sepia is a really good option. Right. Then we're going to go with burnt sienna. Now, burnt sienna is an absolute staple. If you're an animal painter, you will have this in your, portfolio, in your selection of paints, because it is the most stunning color. Now, you can get variants of burnt sienna, oxide reds and, other variants, but, and you get a brown oxide as well, iron oxide, which are similar but different, but really essential for doing chestnuts. Burnt sienna, and I missed burnt umber up here, so let's go with your burnt umber. Burnt umber again, it's classic. It's sort of in all paint packs. A very common color. All brands do burnt umber. So there you go. That is a Cotman burnt umber. And we'll finish up with raw sienna. Right. So there you go. There's raw sienna. So can you see how that range would cover most horse coat colors? So obviously, if you're painting a grey horse, that's slightly different, but we will cover it when we come to doing, the second half of the video. So now we're going to move on to other useful colors. So we'll start off with Van Dyke Brown. Now, in a previous video, I'd mentioned about, different brands looking different. So, but particularly with Van Dyke Brown. So I'm just going to show you two different brands to show you how different they are. So the first one is Jackson's. So this is Jackson's Van Dyke Brown. So I'm just adding more water, so hopefully you can see the color. And the second one I'm going to show you is Mainery Blue. Now look how different those colors are. So if you're looking to do a slightly redder coat and you have that color in your mind and you choose this one, you're going to get totally the wrong color. Okay, now the next one is Grey Titanium. Now this is a color I've only just discovered recently, but it's really good for doing pale coats. So if you are painting a grey, this is a good color to have in your palette. It's not something I use very often, but when I do need it, it is very useful. Now then we've got yellow ochre. Now yellow ochre is fairly similar to raw sienna, but it's a slightly more opaque color and would be useful if you were painting a buckskin. Can you see it's yellower than the raw sienna? And the last color, which I'm sure everyone's got in their palette, is Payne's Grey. A minute, there we go. So those, in a nutshell, are probably the colours I use most when I'm painting animals. So now, in a couple of minutes, we're going to switch over and we're actually going to find some real coat colours of horses, and we're going to try and match them using these colours. So I will see you in a minute. So now we're going to try and match our coat colours to our paint, starting off with the buckskin. It's a tricky one, a buckskin. But the rules are still the same, the process is still the same. Look at whatever it is that you're painting and try and identify every colour that you think you can see in there. So I can see, particularly around the neck, there's only 3 basic colours: titanium grey, yellow ochre and burnt sienna. So I will quickly do those on this side. So we start off with the yellow ochre, then we've got our burnt sienna, and the last one was titanium grey. Okay, so if we mix those together, we get sort of this sort of colour. I'm going to put slightly more burnt sienna in it. I mean, obviously every horse is different. You know, your horse, when you're painting it, is going to be different. I'm just trying to give you a rough guide to how to achieve those colours. So these are just all my colour mixes that I would use for a buckskin. Some of them are quite orange, so if you find that you've got quite an orange buckskin, by all means introduce a sort of a darker orange or more burnt sienna into that colour mix to achieve that colour. So if we quickly recap, 3 basic colours: yellow ochre, burnt sienna, titanium grey. But if you've got a darker coat colour, you can always introduce a little bit of Payne's grey into that mix, which gives you an almost a sort of a grey colour. Add a bit more yellow ochre. So that's the same Payne's grey. So if we bring our horse in, can you see particularly around here, you know, they're good coat colours for doing a buckskin. Okay, so now we'll move on to a chestnut. Now, essential colours when painting a chestnut. Obviously, we've got burnt sienna, essential. But I'm also going to introduce that Van Dyke brown, the redder one, which was the Jacksons. And then I might introduce a little bit of burnt sienna just in some areas. Oops, it's a bit pale. So if we look at this horse, you know, a lot of these, especially this one, if we're talking about the Van Dyke brown, you know, and maybe with some sepia to darken up, especially for the ears, you know, and around the darker areas. And obviously you've got your burnt sienna. Maybe even introduce a little bit of cadmium red into that mix to get your chestnut. So if we mix burnt sienna and Van Dyke brown, even if you've got those, you know, those basic colours, your burnt umber, burnt sienna, Van Dyke brown, those 3 colours, you can get such a huge range of colours when it comes to, you know, you don't need every colour in the spectrum to be able to make a huge range of colours. Right, so I think we've cracked the chestnut there. We'll now go on to a grey. So the thing about greys is that it's not the colour, it's the reflected colour. So it depends where they're standing, where the light is, and you know what colours are being reflected on their coat. My main rule is, so this is this one which has got a lot of apricot colours reflected, is try not to use too much white. You will find that you probably have to use some white, especially if your background paint bleeds, or you know something happens that you splash paint. It's inevitable that you're going to use white, you know, especially for, you know, if I was painting this, the tendrils at the end. Yes, you can use masking fluid, but masking fluid is not that wonderful to to be able to get those really smooth hairlines. I find if you keep your white to a minimum, it has more impact and you'll get better hairs, you know, when it's against the background. So talking about colors, I mean, I would probably use titanium grey as my base. Where you've got those dark shadows, sorry, not dark shadows, you know, around the muzzle area, I might mix Payne's grey and a burnt umber. What do we get there? Maybe a little bit more grey. But just limit it. Don't do your paint too thick. Keep it light, and because you don't want to make, when you've got a dark animal, a light animal, you don't want to make any areas too dark, unless it's those real shadow areas. But again, try and not overdo it, because people can, you know, overpaint and make areas too dark and it just looks slightly weird. So if you are thinking about, you know, looking at the matching of these colours, that's probably too dark. You want to keep it lighter. So then we talk about these reflected colours. So again, I'm going to use it, and it's essentially, you know, have lots of clean water. Always have clean water when you're painting white or grey horses or animals, because there's nothing worse than painting a green background and then going and painting the animal and you've suddenly got green streaks going through. So again, this is all about the reflected colour. So I'm mixing titanium grey with other colours. So it's just picking up a little bit of a reflected colour. And of course you can use blue, you can mix a little bit of the Payne's grey. So get a slight blue tinge to it. So they're all really pale. So I will actually, in a future video, I will actually paint a white horse or a grey horse to show you how we try and keep those colours really light. But you can see how these are all really pale, and this is the type of tones that you want to maintain throughout the painting to keep that, you know, that beautiful lightness. Okay, I think we'll just do one more. I might do a black horse next, so I'll be back in a minute. Okay. So when painting a black coat, there are elements that are similar to painting a white coat, in the sense of, yes, the hairs are black, but there is reflected colour. So, you know, the actual solid black areas are quite restrained and limited. So if we look at this horse, you know, the black colours are probably, you know, parts of the leg and maybe the tail, but the rest of it has colour in it. So you have to really look, use your eyes, try and assess what colours they are. Now, as a generalisation, black animals either have a blue tint to them or a brown tint, you know, a warm tint. Should I say warm or cool? I should be professional here. Either warm or cool. So this one has a blue tint to his coat. So I have introduced another colour here. I've introduced ultramarine. So if so obviously the black is just, you know, just black. If you introduce another colour, so I'm introducing blue, and you start getting that colour, which is great. So if you were painting a black coat and, you know, that's the middle of his flank, and then as you come down towards the legs or underneath the belly, it starts getting darker, you know, so you can introduce your black down there, and then you have to blend it. So you start, oops, it's too black. Right. And you can do exactly the same with a brown tone. So if we then we'll mix the burnt sienna, I think, with the black. So that's when you mix those tones, and obviously it's exactly the same, you know, for where the shadow is, you've obviously got your black at the bottom. It's a beautiful colour when you get a chestnut horse with black legs or black points. Beautiful. And then just blend as you come down. This is a hot press paper, if anybody wanted to know, I should have said. Okay, so I think that covers it for sort of the basic colours. My next video, I'm actually going to be painting a buckskin horse, just in general terms, to give you a lot of general points about how to choose your photo, how to start, what to do first, what colours to use, and how to start, you know, laying the colours down. But we'll do a few different colours in future videos and, you know, just to give you tips along the way. So I hope you've enjoyed that and found it useful, and I'll see you next time. Bye.